My name is Dorothy Paramore, and I was 35 years old when my marriage ended. Not with screaming or slammed doors, but with one sentence spoken calmly in a therapist's office that changed how I saw everything. Before that moment, I would have told you my life was solid, not perfect, but stable in the way adults are told to value. I worked as an operations manager for a mid-sized tech company on the East Coast, good salary, predictable hours, the kind of job that let you breathe without constantly checking your bank account. My husband, Antonio Paramore, and I had been married for 5 years. No kids yet, but we talked about it. Or maybe I talked about it, and he nodded along just enough to keep the conversation alive. Looking back, that should have been my first warning. Antonio was charming in a quiet way, thoughtful, expressive, always chasing feeling. I was the planner, the anchor, the one who made sure bills were paid, emergencies handled, futures considered. We balanced each other, or at least that's what I believed. I met Antonio in college. He studied communications. I was business administration. He was expressive, funny, magnetic in social settings. I was steadier, observant, the one people leaned on when things went wrong. Opposites attract until they don't. The early years of marriage were good. I supported him through job changes, uncertainty, and creative detours. When he lost a position due to downsizing, I picked up extra consulting work without complaint. I encouraged him to take time to find himself. I even declined a promotion that would have required relocation because he wasn't ready to move. "We'll build our life here," I told him. No rush. Eventually, he found work again and things seemed fine. But around year 4, something shifted. He stayed out later, became distant. His phone was always face down, always buzzing. When I asked about his day, his answers were vague, not defensive, just empty. Then came the comparisons. "Oh, my ex-girlfriend, Lena, just quit her job to travel for a year. That takes guts. Lena always pushed me to live bigger." He said it casually, too casually. Lena was his ex from before we met someone he'd mentioned in passing years ago. The one that got away, but said jokingly like a harmless anecdote. Except now her name kept resurfacing. Social media posts followed cryptic captions about settling, about passion fading, about remembering who you used to be. I saw them. He never tagged me. I didn't confront him. I didn't want to be the insecure wife. Instead, I suggested marriage counseling. "We've invested too much to let things rot quietly," I said. He agreed without enthusiasm. The therapist's office was downtown. Neutral colors, soft lighting, designed to feel safe. We sat on opposite ends of a couch while Dr. Elaine Morris settled into her chair between us. She asked why we were there. I went first, talked about the emotional distance, how I wanted to reconnect, how I felt like I was slowly being edged out of my own marriage. Antonio listened, nodding his phone tucked beneath his leg. When it was his turn, he sighed. "Dorothy is great on paper," he said, "but lately it feels like we're just roommates." That word hit harder than I expected. Dr. Morris asked him to explain. He spoke about boredom, predictability, feeling stuck. I told myself this was progress honesty, even if it hurt. Then the therapist asked about unresolved past relationships. Antonio hesitated, then shrugged. "There's my ex, Lena. We reconnected online a while back. Talking to her just reminds me of what I might be missing." My stomach dropped, but I stayed quiet. Dr. Morris leaned forward. "Antonio, how does that affect your commitment to this marriage?" He didn't hesitate this time. He looked directly at me and said, "If Lena asked me back tomorrow, I'd leave you." The room went silent. Dr. Morris froze pen hovering midair. I felt something inside me shut off, not anger, not grief, clarity. I stood up slowly, hands steady, heart pounding, but controlled. "Thank you for your time," I said calmly. "I think I've heard enough." Antonio blinked. "Wait, Dorothy, sit down. We're not done." "Yes, we are," I replied, already turning toward the door. Behind me, the therapist stammered something about processing emotions, but I was already walking away. By the time I reached the parking lot, my phone started ringing. I didn't answer. I never would again, not the same way. I didn't go home that night. Instead of turning the car toward the house, Antonio and I had picked together white siding, tidy lawn. The illusion of permanence, I drove across town to my friend Melissa Carter's apartment. She took one look at my face, stepped aside without asking questions, and let me collapse onto her couch like gravity had finally caught up with me. I slept maybe 2 hours. The rest of the night passed in fragments, my phone lighting up on the coffee table vibration after vibration. Antonio's name flashing until I turned it face down. Somewhere between 2:00 and 3:00 a.m., curiosity got the better of me. I listened to one voicemail. Dorothy, that came out wrong, Antonio said, his voice tight, irritated more than remorseful. I was just being honest, like the therapist asked. Don't overreact. We can fix this. Fix this. As if honesty without loyalty was something to applaud. As if admitting he'd leave me for another woman was a brave emotional exercise instead of a confession of where I ranked in his life. I deleted the message and turned the phone off. The next morning, the clarity from the therapist's office hadn't faded. If anything, it had hardened. I wasn't crying. I wasn't shaking. I was calm in a way that felt unfamiliar and irreversible. Antonio tried again by noon. Text this time. You're really walking away over words, grow up, Dorothy. We can talk like adults. I didn't reply. By late afternoon, his family entered the chat right on schedule. His sister Rachel Paramore called first. Antonio's a mess, she said without preamble. He didn't mean it like that. You know how he talks when he's pressured. I know exactly what he meant, I replied evenly. You're throwing away 5 years over one session, she pressed. Every marriage hits rough patches. This wasn't a rough patch, I said. This was honesty, she scoffed. So you're just done. No fighting for it. I fought, I said quietly. For years. I hung up before she could respond. That night I made a decision that felt small but wasn't. I blocked Antonio's number, not forever, just enough to think clearly. I packed a weekend bag at Melissa's place, then realized I didn't want to go back at all. The next morning I called a divorce attorney. It wasn't dramatic. No revenge plotting. No scorched earth fantasies. I just wanted out with dignity intact. The lawyer explained my options. No-fault divorce. Even asset split. The house was in both our names. I told her Antonio could stay there for now. I didn't want the emotional warfare of eviction. Distance mattered more than property. Antonio found out I'd contacted a lawyer through his mother. She emailed me that evening. A long message, every sentence steeped in accusation disguised as concern. I raised my son, to be honest, she wrote. You're punishing him for expressing his feelings. What kind of woman abandons her husband when he's vulnerable? I stared at the screen, heat rising in my chest. Not rage, but something colder. Honesty without accountability wasn't vulnerability. It was entitlement. I didn't respond. Over the next week, Antonio cycled through emotions like clockwork. Apologies turned into frustration. Frustration into blame. This is your fault, one voicemail said. You made our life boring. Safe. You pushed me toward her. That was the moment something clicked fully into place. I wasn't his partner. I was his backup plan. And I was done auditioning for relevance in my own marriage. I returned to the house once midday when I knew he'd be at work. I packed essentials, only closed documents, a few sentimental items I refused to negotiate over. I didn't touch shared furniture, didn't leave a note. I wasn't disappearing, I was disengaging. I moved into a small apartment near my office branch. 1 bedroom, plain walls, a view of a parking lot. It wasn't impressive, but it was quiet, and for the first time in months, I slept through the night. Work became my anchor. I accepted the promotion. I'd once declined the one that had scared Antonio because it meant growth instead of comfort. The responsibility grounded me. Meetings, deadlines, decisions that were mine alone. Physically, I poured myself into routine. Early mornings, gym sessions that burned the restless energy out of my muscles. It wasn't about revenge or glow-ups. It was about reclaiming my body from the constant tension I hadn't realized I was carrying. I also started therapy, again alone this time. A different therapist. Someone who didn't ask me to soften betrayal into communication styles. You were loyal past the point of self-respect, she told me during one session. That's not love. That's erosion. Antonio's attempts didn't stop, but they changed tone. Burner numbers. Emails framed as closure. His family doubling down, insisting I was being cruel by choosing silence. I wasn't cruel. I was choosing boundaries. And somewhere beneath the grief, I hadn't fully allowed myself to feel, yet something steadier was forming a sense that walking away hadn't been the end of my life. It had been the beginning of my spine. The first few months after I left didn't feel like freedom. They felt like withdrawal. I'd wake up in my quiet apartment, stare at the ceiling, and brace myself for a wave of doubt that never quite arrived, but always threatened to. There was grief, sure, but it was muted, buried under something sturdier. Determination, maybe. Or pride. Or just the deep exhaustion of someone who had finally stopped trying to be enough for someone who never intended to choose them. I didn't spiral. I didn't drink excessively. I didn't stalk Antonio's social media. I existed. Work filled the hours. The promotion I'd once postponed became my focus. I managed a remote team, now handled travel-made decisions without asking permission. The confidence that crept in surprised me. I hadn't lost my footing after the marriage cracked, I'd found it. On weekends, I hiked, joined a trivia league, said yes to invitations from people who didn't know me as Antonio's wife. People who didn't tiptoe around my history or expect me to explain it. When mutual friends reached out, I didn't vent. I told the truth plainly. He said he'd leave me if his ex asked, I'd say, so I left first. That was enough. Quietly, sides shifted. Invitations stopped reaching Antonio. Group chats went silent on his end. I didn't ask for loyalty. Reality did the sorting for me. I heard about him through the grapevine, never directly, never sought out. He'd moved in with Lena about a month after I left. At first it sounded cinematic. Weekend trips, flashy restaurants, new beginnings wrapped in Instagram-worthy ambiguity. He posted less, but when he did, it was all about living boldly and choosing passion. I felt nothing. Then the tone changed. Friends mentioned tension. Her job situation was unstable. His spending spiked. Arguments in public places. He'd chased excitement and found volatility. Meanwhile, my life kept expanding slowly, deliberately. I picked up freelance consulting again on the side. Cyber operations work that padded my savings and reminded me I was capable beyond what my marriage had reduced me to. I trained harder at the gym. Lost weight I hadn't realized I was carrying not just physically, but emotionally. And then without ceremony, Evan Parker entered my life. We met at a professional conference. He worked in logistics strategy, calm observant with a dry sense of humor that didn't need an audience. We talked over coffee about work frustrations, favorite hiking trails, bad hotel breakfasts. There was no spark explosion, no chasing, just ease. I told him about my divorce early, not as a warning, but as context. He didn't flinch or interrogate, just nodded and said, "That sounds painful. I'm glad you walked away." That was it. No trying to fix me, no romanticizing my resilience. As my life stabilized, Antonio's unraveled. The glamorous phase with Lena burned out fast. Her freelance ventures bled money. His income couldn't keep up. Friends whispered about shouting matches, about him drinking more, about her disappearing for days at a time. Then she left. Not dramatically, not with closure. She drained what she could and walked away, reportedly moving on to someone else without a backward glance. Antonio lost his job soon after. Missed deadlines. Emotional volatility at work. Terminated with a severance that barely bought time. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. He'd called stability boring. He'd chased fire. Now he was standing in ashes. I didn't celebrate. I didn't reach out. I just kept building. Evan and I grew closer organically. Weekend trips, quiet dinners, conversations that didn't feel like negotiations. I wasn't performing usefulness anymore. I was simply present. By the time I looked in the mirror and recognized the woman staring back, steady, confident, unburdened, I knew something important. Antonio hadn't been my world. He'd been my lesson. And lessons once learned don't need repeating. Karma didn't arrive with fireworks. It came quietly through other people's voices and half-finished sentences and uncomfortable pauses, never directly, never with spectacle. And that made it more powerful. I first heard the full version of what happened between Antonio and Lena from a mutual acquaintance who hadn't realized I was still out of the loop. They moved in together fast, she said over coffee, lowering her voice instinctively. Like immediately. It was intense at first. Trips, late nights, big promises, but it went downhill fast. I nodded, more curious than emotional. Lena, it turned out, wasn't the carefree adventurer Antonio had romanticized. Her freelance work was unstable. Some weeks she made money. Most weeks she didn't. She relied on Antonio more than he'd expected financially, emotionally, logistically. And Antonio, who once told me stability was suffocating, suddenly found himself responsible for it again. The arguments started over money, then over time, then over control. Friends mentioned public blow-ups, raised voices at bars, slammed doors at parties, awkward silences after. One night it spilled over completely. Lena accused him of holding her back. He accused her of using him. Words escalated. A glass shattered. People stared. She left a week later, took what she could, left dead in her wake, and disappeared. Antonio spiraled. The job he'd clung to began slipping. Deadlines missed. Mood swings. A meeting where he snapped at his supervisor sealed it. He was let go with a severance package that barely covered rent. Without Lena, without work, without the audience, he thrived on the emptiness he'd been avoiding, finally caught up. I didn't hear this from him. I heard it from everyone else. He's not doing well, someone said cautiously. He seems lost, another whispered. He really messed up with you. I didn't correct them, I didn't add details, I didn't need to. Meanwhile, my life moved forward with quiet momentum. Evan met my friends, not with grand gestures or forced charm, just steady presence. He didn't need to dominate rooms. He listened, remembered small things, showed up when he said he would. The contrast was impossible to ignore. While Antonio chased intensity and collapsed under it, I built consistency and flourished. His family noticed. Rachel stopped calling. His mother's emails tapered off, shifting from accusatory to hesitant. Then the messages changed tone. Antonio's struggling. He's really learned his lesson. Don't you think people deserve second chances? I read them once, then archived them. Because here was the truth they didn't want to face. I hadn't left to punish Antonio. I'd left because staying meant betraying myself. The consequences he faced weren't my revenge. They were his choices unfolding naturally, no interference required. And for the first time, I felt something close to peace. Not happiness yet, not closure, but peace. The messages started again, about 3 weeks after Antonio lost his job. At first, they were careful, polite, almost professional. New numbers, emails framed like business correspondence. Dorothy, can we talk? I've had a lot of time to reflect. I owe you an apology. I didn't respond. Silence had become my strongest boundary, and I wasn't about to weaken it just because he'd finally run out of options. Then the tone shifted. The apology softened into nostalgia. The reflection turned into regret. Regret hardened into desperation. One evening, I came home from work, dropped my bag by the door, and froze when I heard the intercom buzz. Dorothy Antonio's voice crackled through the speaker. It's me, please, just let me up. I drove a long way. I stood there for a full 30 seconds staring at the wall. Curiosity won. I buzzed him in, but I kept the chain on the door. When he knocked, the man on the other side barely resembled the person who'd once told me I was boring. His hair was unkempt, his eyes hollow. The confidence he wore like armor had collapsed inward, leaving only need. Thank you, he breathed, stepping closer. I've been a mess. Lena, she ruined me, took my savings, used me. I lost my job because I couldn't focus. I'm staying with my mom now, and it's hell. I didn't invite him in. What do you want, Antonio? I asked. His voice dropped. Us. I want us back. There it was. He talked fast after that, like he was afraid I'd shut the door mid-sentence. Therapy, growth, lessons learned, how losing everything made him realize what truly mattered. You were always the stable one, he said, eyes shining. The good one. I just didn't see it then. But now I do. We can start over. I didn't raise my voice. You already started over, I said calmly, with her. That was a mistake, he insisted. You drove me away with your routine life. No passion, no risks. But now I understand stability isn't boring, it's love. The logic was almost impressive in its flexibility. You blamed me when you were bored, I said. Now you want me back because you're broke and alone. His expression hardened. So that's it, he snapped. After everything I endured, your safe job, your control, your constant planning, you're just done. I'm done being a backup, I replied. His anger flared fully then. You're heartless, walking out like a coward when I hit rock bottom. I closed the door, slowly locking it before his words could follow me inside. Goodbye, Antonio. The family barrage returned within days. Rachel called from a private number. You're being cruel, she said. Antonio's not eating. He's depressed. You can't just abandon someone you loved. He abandoned me first, I replied and ended the call. His mother emailed again, longer this time, dripping with moral outrage. What kind of woman leaves her husband when he needs her most? The kind who learned the difference between loyalty and self-erasure. Antonio left voicemails after that, swinging wildly between pleading and rage. You owe me this. We were married. You're nothing without me. I listened to one, then deleted the rest. My life didn't pause for his collapse. Evan and I grew closer. Real plans replaced hypothetical ones. Shared weekends, talk of travel. Futures that didn't require shrinking myself to keep someone else comfortable. Antonio's chaos faded into background noise. And when it tried to claw its way back into my world, I didn't flinch. I'd already chosen peace. Stop! Type continue when you're ready for part 6. Public closure and a quiet victory. Part 6. Public closure and a quiet victory. 9 months after the counseling session that ended my marriage, I stood in a sunlit park holding a glass of champagne, listening to vows that weren't mine, and finally feeling grateful for that. The wedding belonged to Thomas Reed, a mutual friend who had managed to stay neutral through the fallout. Small ceremony, outdoor venue, simple elegance, the kind of event meant to celebrate beginnings, not reopen old wounds. I attended with Evan Parker. By then we were solid, not loud about it, not performative, just steady. He knew my history in broad strokes. Didn't need details to understand boundaries. When he took my hand as we found our seats, it wasn't acclaim, it was comfort. I didn't expect to see Antonio there. But halfway through the reception, I spotted him near the bar, hovering at the edge of conversations like he wasn't sure where he belonged. He looked thinner, the sharpness in his posture gone. His suit was a little too tight, his smile a little too forced. He noticed me seconds later. Our eyes met. I looked away first, not out of fear, but indifference. That didn't stop him. He cornered me near the buffet while Evan was talking with friends. "Dorothy," he said quietly urgent. "Didn't expect you here. You look good." "So do you?" I lied politely. "It's good to see you," he continued, stepping closer. "I've changed. Therapy, real therapy this time. Losing everything woke me up. I see what I lost now." I nodded once. "Antonio, it's Thomas's wedding. Let's not do this." He ignored that. "You were my life," he said. "We can rebuild. I'll do anything." His eyes flicked toward Evan, who was laughing easily across the lawn. The contrast said everything. "Who's he?" Antonio asked, voice tight. "A rebound." I set my plate down and met his gaze calmly. "That's Evan," I said. "We're happy." Something in Antonio cracked. After 5 years, he scoffed, bitterness flooding back. "You're cold. Walking away when I'm at my lowest." "No," I corrected evenly. "You walked away first. I just didn't wait around to be replaced again." He shook his head. "You'll regret this. When he's gone, you'll realize I was the one." I almost smiled. "Doubt it," I said. "Enjoy the wedding." Evan joined me, then slipping an arm around my waist naturally. Not territorial, just present. Antonio stood there for a moment longer, watching us walk away together, not defeated, not furious. Just irrelevant. That night I blocked his number permanently. The divorce finalized shortly after. He kept the house, sold it in a rush months later when he couldn't maintain it alone. I was promoted again. Evan and I traveled, laughed, built something rooted in choice, not obligation. The betrayal that once consumed me became a story, not my identity. And if there's one thing I learned, it's this. When someone tells you you're a backup plan,